All right. Good evening, everybody. Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the SEA podcast. Very excited to be here. I'm your host, Anthony Shirley, and with me today is Benjamin Bishop, who is our very first SEA guest. So we are very excited to have him here. So just give a little bit of background on Benjamin before I let him start talking. So Benjamin is a licensed social worker with experience in both direct practice and community organizing. He's created a pioneering care model that embraces nature-human connection in order to improve recovery and community integration outcomes for people with severe mental illness diagnosis. His model has been applied successfully throughout the full continuum on behavioral health care and resulted in multiple significant outcomes. His article, Nature for Mental Health and Social Inclusion, published in Disability Studies Quarterly, details the foundations of his work, and he has presented findings in multiple national conferences. While his work has been recognized both locally and nationally, Benjamin lectures and facilitates accredited training on eco-psychology and ecotherapeutic techniques. So without further ado, Benjamin, how are we doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me.
No problem, no problem. So just based off that introduction, um, and when I was doing all my research and everything, Benjamin, it's really amazing some of the stuff that you do and the research that you've gathered over the years. And I know I had been talking to you in my email as well that one of the projects that I'm currently working on through the SCA relates to ecotherapy and everything.
Yeah.
So before I started asking you some questions, I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. So what exactly I'm doing is I'm creating pretty much 360-degree 3D videos through immersive virtual reality to where people will be able to then use the videos that they have on YouTube that I record in like an Oculus headset or in like 3D type setting to really help towards ecotherapy. And I think it's really interesting, especially because the more and more I've learned about it, you know, when I first started taking on the project, you know, I was like, what is ecotherapy? What, you know, what is this all about? So the more
Right.
more and more I looked into it, but I'm gonna let you do the explaining because you're the expert here. So what exactly is ecotherapy and what does it do?
Well, there's a couple of things that I want to touch on first. First of all, eco-psychology. Eco-psychology is kind of our relationship with the earth, humans' relationship with the earth. It really combines psychology and the environmental movement. And it's really promoting well-being. So it's the social, the physical, the cognitive, psychological, and even spiritual well-being of everybody. So it can relate to individuals and community at the same time. Really, the underlying focus of eco-psychology is the focus on how the human, as part of nature, are kind of inseparable from the surrounding environment. And our psychological impacts that are result from the level of bonding or even the alienation from the natural world. So ecotherapy is kind of like a underlying factor of eco-psychology, where it's psychology that is embracing the ecology, working with humans in a holistic theory, focusing on the human's physical and mental health. We're really looking in the therapeutic aspect of it to help people reconnect to the natural world as a part of, rather than separate from, nature. So ecotherapy really is a broad term. There are specific techniques and interventions, though, that work through ecotherapy processes that are generally regulated, structured activities that are facilitated by a professional. So they can be standalone or even as a part of other treatments. So they in tandem with somebody who's getting medications, talk therapies, trauma-related interventions, even the creative arts that can be used as well. So again, it's a broad term, and there's also multiple terms that go along with ecotherapy too. So there's no like really a regulation on what the term is. So you can hear green exercise, green care, horticultural therapy, which is actually a profession, therapeutic horticulture, which I kind of go into, and nature therapy. So there's different terms out there, but they're all centered around what ecotherapy is, the relationship of our, as humans, relationship to the earth. So it can be done indoors, urban, suburban, even rural areas. It could be active participation, so like gardening or working with animals, versus like a more passive, just kind of reflecting on the land itself. Could be formal, informal kind of treatment, individual and group experiences. But really, you're looking at all different varieties of settings that people can go into. So again, broad terminology, but kind of centered on our relationship with the earth.
No, and that's truly incredible. And so just to, because one of the things that you had said that I just stuck with me a little bit. So through the eco psychology, in a sense, like hypothetically, when you remove a human from a natural setting completely,
right,
there over a course of time, would you actually be able to see negative effects of that person not being in contact with nature, even in the most basic sense of going outside and taking a walk? Will you start to see some negative reactions to that person?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, take a look at people that are in solitary confinement in jails. They at first, they didn't have any access. I mean, this is maybe a century ago, didn't really have access to the outside world. They were in solitary confinement 24 hours a day. That was considered cruel and unusual punishment because they would have, go into a psychosis almost. They would have, trauma related to that. You're removing that person. We are intricately connected to nature. We are a part of nature. We grew up in nature. Our genes are kind of, in that vein. We have to have a connection. So yeah, there's definitely, if you withdraw yourself from, you're going to see negative side effects, most definitely.
Now that's incredible. And that was one of the things that really struck me when I was doing my studies and stuff like that, to see that how much of a connection we truly do have. And well said, because we do come from nature. I feel like, how advanced we are in society today, a lot of people still forget that we're just a different species living on the same planet. And that's something a lot of people tend to forget.
Right.
So that kind of leads me into one of my next questions. Do you feel that going in towards the future with all the technologies that we have today, do you think that it's something that will be enhanced as the future goes on and there will be more effective ways to connect with nature? Or do you feel like it'll be more of a disconnect in the future with nature and moving forward with technology?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. You really kind of have to think of who is actually going to be doing it. People like yourself that is creating something for individuals that can't get out in nature. It's certainly a great thing. So it really depends. I mean, we certainly have the potential to enhance through apps on our phones, through the project at the Sea Wilderness, and other virtual reality things that are happening on there. However, I think we all understand that if we solely rely on one thing, it's not going to be a good thing. So technology as a cure-all for all of this, there's a potential where humans would just kind of get away with it. If we can just put on glasses and just walk through the earth or, a trail, we might disregard the actual natural world if we're all just putting goggles on. So there has to be a good mix. We have the technology, but then you also have the reality that is out there that I think we just need to play around with. So if we forget about and kind of not rely on our own sensory, all the other senses, we could just forget about the natural world and just put our glasses on and we just won't do it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, for sure. I mean, personally, I'm one person that I love the great outdoors, being able to go on a hike. One of my favorite places to be. You ask me, where's one place you can always go? I'll go to the beach any day of the week. I don't care. That's somewhere that I always feel comfortable. And also another thing that I kind of realized is while doing the studies and preparing, they kind of make that connection myself. It's like you do actually feel better when you go on a hike or when you go, not just the sense of oh, it's something you enjoy, but just being immersed in that setting, in that nature, being able to take in everything, hearing the animals, smelling the fresh air. It really, if for even a basic person who just wants to go out and hike, it could be so therapeutic. It could be so mind clearing. And I just think it's really interesting to see how many different avenues besides just going outside and taking a walk, how many more levels there are to it. And the research and everything that you do, it really is.
Take, for instance, right now, you're sitting in a room right now that has a door behind you. You have access to, I guess, a window over there. But if that was closed in and you were there all day, even if you're taking classes all day and weren't able to go outside, you would probably feel the effects. You know, you feel more refreshed, you feel more relaxed when you're out in the natural world. Granted, there are negative aspects of the natural world too. I mean, we have, you know, tornadoes and hurricanes and all that kind of stuff where it actually produces trauma. But I mean, here, I think we're just talking about the beneficial aspects. So, you know, as people will feel the difference between staying within an area, or even people call it like cabin fever every year. You know, they want to get outside, they need to get outside. So they, you know, you feel the effects even in the winter in our climate. So.
No, absolutely. And I think with this past year more than ever, with the pandemic and everything, almost being trapped in our houses, I think this is something that people could benefit from, you know, more than any other time previously, because of how many people, like I even myself sometimes, you know, in my apartment, I have like some days you just get cooped up and you just don't want to be inside. You just want to be anywhere except inside. And what better way to, you know, just clear your head than just walk and take a stroll, whether, especially if you're in a nice area that has like a lot of natural settings around to enjoy. I think that's definitely a huge benefit.
Or even a simple like deep breath of fresh air is different from air conditioned air or staying inside and, you know, smelling that. So big difference.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so one other thing I wanted to ask you, you know, going through all of the ecotherapy and research and of the eco psychology, how did you find your way into this studies? I know when I was doing some research on yourself, I saw that your background is mainly social work and everything like that. How did you kind of find the eco psychology side of it and then grow it to where it is now and everything that you do and how much information you've gathered from it? So where did you start?
Yeah, so strangely enough, I used to be a pastry chef in my first career. And I would garden, I would feel the effects of myself, you know, going out there, actually having a stressful day at work and then coming back and, you know, feeling the effects of just working out in the garden. Plus, I would bring that back into the pastry shop. But I got out of that because I felt that I wanted to give back to, you know, society a little bit more. And I wanted to work in psychiatric care. So I didn't really fall into it. I explicitly went back to school to social work to, you know, focus on the use of horticulture in therapy, because I saw the effects of not only me, and I have to assume that everybody else is going to be doing it too. I started reading up on things that were done in state hospitals. Granted, they were more obligatory for people to work on the farms to sustain the hospitals, but there was effects that were actually happening there for people to be released a lot sooner and had better outcomes. So I wanted to kind of recreate that a little bit. And there's, you know, other things going around the world, but United States really seems to have a lack of this type of intervention. So I really wanted to focus on that. Working in inpatient first, even just posting pictures on a locked inpatient unit for people that are experiencing really acute symptomatology for schizophrenia, schizoaffective, and bipolar disorders. Major outcomes where their symptoms went down just because pictures were put up onto the walls. And then I moved forward after seeing that, some really significant outcomes there. Moved into like outpatient and even an intensive outpatient where we did nature groups and, you know, gathered more data there that, you know, there was increased participation and community gardens where people once thought that the individuals that were being served at that agency were, you know, less than stellar citizens. And they come to believe that, you know, they're actually working with them in the community garden right now. They were just cleaning out today, in fact. Well, not today, it's raining. Yesterday it was. But it just compounded and it just get me more and more interested. And I just kept going on with it and trying to get other people interested. And that's where the trainings, like you mentioned before in the introduction, and even going to national conferences and presenting. We used to do this, you know, we used to do this back in the 60s and 70s, and it just kind of got lost. Especially with the advent of psychopharmacology and giving people pills because, you know, it got them out of the hospital faster. But we need to, you know, do more holistic treatments. And this is an adjunctive part of people's treatment that can work.
Wow, that's truly amazing. Now, did you ever have a moment while you were going through that, like you had in your career, that specific moment, you were like, this is like I know what I'm doing right now is causing an impact, and I know that this will better people throughout my lifetime. What did you ever have that moment?
I had a very specific moment where I needed to keep doing this. There was a gentleman on that inpatient unit. We had a garden club, we called it. It was a group for all the individuals that were on the unit, which was, there was 23 individuals on that unit, plus all the staff. So it was a very close environment. This gentleman, I'll call him Mr. L. Mr. L, he, very disorganized. That was part of his symptoms. Extremely disorganized to the point where you could not understand what he was trying to talk to you about unless you talked to him for about 45 minutes. Very disorganized, word salad it's called. You know, just could not form sentences, could not form real words. You know, he would just kind of bring in stream of consciousness all the time. So he refused. He was in the hospital for about 6 months by the time I started working with him. He refused to come to this group because it would give him too much hope. He and I got to talk a little bit more, got a little bit more comfortable. He came into one group and we were talking about photosynthesis and germination. He sat next to me and he raised his hand because he wanted to kind of share with the group what he knew. Understanding that it takes him so long to get out what he wanted to talk about, I was like, just hold on, Mr. L, we'll get to you towards the end. But he kept insisting and wanting to talk. I could not believe it. The nurses could not believe it, who actually worked with this gentleman who used to be in a state hospital. He spoke in such a clear, understandable way. His disorganized disappeared, and he talked to everybody about germination and photosynthesis. He was homeless for a good part of his adult life, and he actually knew what to do and how to grow plants because he would do that when he was out on the streets. And everybody was just astounded. Our jaws just dropped. Nobody has heard him be this clear. The session ended, the group ended, and he went right back to being disorganized. It was just amazing. Everybody just could not believe it. So that was the very specific moment where I said, I need to keep doing this. This is what fills my soul. And it was fascinating to experience.
That's incredible. That just gave me chills right there. I was like, oh my God.
I know. I usually cry at that because it's so profound.
That's incredible. And now, what exact ecotherapy technique was being used? Were you using with him to help him?
Well, so at that time, it was more of the socialization piece of it, because there was a lot of individuals that just, they were kind of removed from society. We're trying to socialize them a little bit more and get them active together. So there was a lot of tactile motion going on there. What was happening in that group was we were growing wheatgrass in styrofoam cups. And they would bring them back every week and kind of compare which one's, higher, which one's lower. Why did this happen? It was just a general discussion of what their plants were doing and what their connection to their plants was. During that same session, we asked, what you give to your plants that makes them grow. Okay, you get the normal sunlight, water, even love goes in there. But then we reverse that question and say, what do your plants give to you that make you grow? And you got some really fascinating, they gave, non-judgmental, they gave you love, they give you, fresh air. It's just, so to your point, there was so many things that we were doing in that. It's kind of hard to tease out what specifically we were doing, but it was more of the social atmosphere that we were trying to generate in that class.
No, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. That's truly a story that is just incredible, and especially how a person can be affected like that in a type of setting in that way. Now, that kind of brings me to my next question. Do you feel that there is a, say, specific, whether it be like mental or physical disorder, like whether it be depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, do you feel that there are ones that can be better treated through the eco psychology and ecotherapy? Like, do you think one is more beneficial to the other? Have you found that through your research?
As far as the eco psychology, ego therapy, or just as far as, a certain population being treated?
Um, I would guess, I feel like what I'm trying to say is like, do you feel like someone, say with anxiety, would be better treated through the ecotherapy techniques rather than someone with depression?
No, I mean, there's different outcomes. That's why working with a professional is, something that really needs to be done. It can't just be, let's just flippantly throw, on a horse or throw a dog in front of you or a plant in front of you. You really want to have targeted goals that you're working with the individual through this process. So somebody with anxiety, be it social anxiety or whatever, could be having a different intervention compared to somebody that is having a depression. So really it's specified by the individual and what they can get out of that program. Some people don't even want to get into kind of the dirt, so to speak. I worked with a gentleman that had obsessive compulsive disorder, and he did not want to get dirty whatsoever. It was something that he just could not do at that time. It is kind of an anxiety disorder. But he was able to contribute to the whole process by actually drawing a map of a garden, because he was an artist at the same time. So, the way that people engage does not necessarily need to be digging in the dirt. It could be anything involved with the natural world and their reflection on it. So to your point, I think everybody can benefit from this, no matter if they are, symptom free or just, a regular old Joe Schmo out there. Everybody benefits. It just really depends on how the professional, the therapist, is actually working with that individual and what they can target for a goal.
Wow. No, that truly is amazing, especially how, you can take that one individual person and work with them to see what works best. Now, when you're working through that process, will you ever run into something that will, I guess the best word to use is say maybe trigger a negative emotional response? Have you ever run into situations like that where maybe it would negatively affect someone that you're trying to treat and then realize like, okay, we won't try this specific therapy, let's move on to something else? Have you ever had that?
Yeah. So there was an individual, we were doing a group, and we were walking through the woods, actually. I make sure that I check in with the individuals first and make sure that they're comfortable. I mean, there's a lot of things going on in the woods. There's a lot of animals crawling around, there's spiders, everything. Unfortunately, this individual, she had a traumatic experience that was in the woods. She was raped at that point in a young life. So she was triggered, and we had to process that emotion for her and get her through that traumatic experience. So we had to kind of take her out of that immersive experience in the woods and talk with her and sit down and process that. So, and that took a couple of weeks, but she wanted to keep continuing. So we did what's called exposure therapy and just slowly integrated her back into, walking into the woods, because she really enjoyed the first part of it. It was when she got down towards a stream that she really felt the effects of the trauma, reliving the trauma. So we had to do exposure therapy with her just to slowly process that with her and have her a little bit more comfortable and process those emotions. So yeah, there's things that pop up. And again, a good reason why, a therapist, a trained professional can work with these individuals.
Wow. That's really something. That's amazing. It's just amazing in so many senses how like not only how nature can affect you, but just how the human mind works in general. You know what I mean? Something as traumatic as that she had faced that happened however many years prior can bring her right back into that situation just by being next to a stream. You know what I mean? It's people that don't know what's going on or understand, like they don't know how to handle that situation. But that really is wow. Some of the things that you've been saying so far has just been truly, I think that's amazing. I think it's just amazing how nature really can just have that effect, whether it be the negatives and the positives, you know what I mean? And the positives being so much more overarching than anything.
Yeah.
And that also brings me to another question. Now, do you think that different nature settings can elicit different responses from people? like an example being, do you think you would get a different response by bringing someone, say, to a beach near the ocean and everything, rather than having them walk through the woods or something like that? Do you think different emotional responses will be triggered?
Yeah, most definitely. So, I mean, there's different affinities that people have. You just said yourself that you love going to the beach, right? Where I love going to the woods. That's just where I get regenerated. And it seems like you get regenerated by going to a beach. I mean, certainly humans themselves have a general affinity and aversion to certain settings. So you really have to work with that individual, understand where they're coming from, understanding what they feel or can elicit from themselves in different settings. You can try them out and see how they are. So you really have to individualize the therapeutic intervention to the historical experiences, their upbringing, even their genetic predisposition, that you can kind of get along with a psychosocial assessment with them and really just kind of understand that individual. This is not something that you want to like do automatically with somebody that's going to your sessions for the first time in a therapeutic, clinical setting. You're going to be getting to know them a little bit more and seeing what they're generated towards, even showing them pictures of saying, oh yeah, that's really calming. I really had a good experience there with my family, or yeah, I just don't like the snake that I saw there, so I'm not going to go into the woods, so really different settings can elicit, and different environments, even objects and scenarios and other beings can elicit, an adverse or an affinity towards, that person. It really just all depends upon what that person wants and what they're looking for as a goal out of their treatment. And it's relative. I mean, we are a part of the whole. So, if, one person, likes the beach, the other person likes the woods, that you can connect them up and really see if there's any similarities at the same time between those two, and talking with them and making sure that, everybody's safe. And you can have a social atmosphere where one is showing the other their environment and their understanding of it. And, maybe that other person might be having a new way of looking at that environment. If that makes sense.
No, yeah, absolutely. Just bringing in other people to the environment that they enjoy and seeing if they like it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now I know you had said, just an example. Now, what is your favorite nature setting? I know you used the woods as an example. Is that it, or do you have a specific place that is just you love to be in? If you need to clear your head, where are you going?
Mine is the woods. I love getting deep into the woods, getting lost. um, I've had different things that happened in my life that the woods were always a part of it. Yeah, that is my place. However, there are other settings that I just really love too. I love going to the beach and seeing sunsets, and going to the ocean, going to an aquarium. I just went to the aquarium a couple weeks ago, and it's just fascinating to see what is out there. I think there's so much wonder and awe that I want to see it all. I like to travel, so I get to see different environments. But the woods are what I always go back to personally for myself.
Nice. Yeah, no. And that's, yeah, like I said before, love the beach. Yeah, I love the woods as well though too. Like you said, different phases in your life. I kind of grew up in both areas. And for me personally, I'm from New Jersey native, and where I live, I'm only about 40 minutes away from the beach. So
Right.
it was always it's like a quick trip, you know what I mean? Didn't have to be a whole day event. It's just somewhere to go. And then on the other hand, I had I have a lot of family in Pennsylvania, so
Mhm.
we would go frequently visit my aunts, uncles, and like there was lakes. We would fish, me, my dad, brother. So really, you're both like, and like personally, just a very, I would say, if I had to say, like, what the question I'd asked before to answer it myself, I would say if I were to be placed maybe in more of like a wood setting, in like that kind of nature setting, I feel for me personally that is more of a
Mhm.
calming feel. Like when I'm in it, I like you said, I like to take it all in deep into the woods. It's just because so many things are going on, you kind of get lost like in your own head, but in a good way. I feel like with everything that goes on, like on a daily basis with like school, classes, work, like it's just so hectic. Like when you're in nature, like I think it's really cool to see, because it's just, even though everything that's hectic going on in nature, like it's something that you could hear, but you can't visualize, because you can look all around, you can hear a million different things going on. You hear birds, animals, insects, all those things, but everything can be still. And then in the same sense, if it's nighttime, everything is it's almost like you can hear yourself, you can hear your own blood going through your body, you hear your own thoughts. Like, so I think being like immersed in the woods is definitely totally different aspect. And then on the other side of the spectrum, whenever I'm on a beach, hanging out, it's more relaxation. Yes, it's calming, but I also like to do things at the beach. It gives me that energy to go and swim the ocean, go play games, walk around, do that kind of stuff, and then be in more of a social setting. When I'm on the beach, I always want to be with like friends, doing stuff and everything. And then meanwhile, I can go on a 3-4 mile hike all by myself and have a fantastic time. So I really do think the emotional responses can be different for any individual.
Exactly. And I mean, you even said it yourself. So you would actually be a great person because you have insight into what your different emotion or responses are to the settings, because you are more energized in one versus the other. And does that play into, if just for example, if you were depressed or something, what setting would be better for you, the woods or the beach? If you have different energized, feelings going to the beach, maybe that would be the better aspect. So this is what we're trying to train individuals, not really train, but kind of relearn their association with the earth and seeing what responses they have. And that's going right along with the therapeutic, interventions. We want to put you in the best place possible so you can, recover through that process. So you're kind of answering a lot of things for me.
No, yeah, absolutely, for sure. Now, when you talk about that learning and education behind everything with eco-psychology, ecotherapy, now did everything that you learned, did you learn like through your education? Like, did you have classes that you had to take, anything? And if so, do you feel that this type of education about being aware with nature and connection to nature, do you think should be something that more people should be aware about?
So to your first point, I went back to school for social work. I did not go to school to become a horticultural therapist. I wanted the therapy aspect into this. I think more clinical aspects of this are needed. So I went into social work because there's a broad range that I could actually work with. I had to create my own curriculum basically, and I was an adult by the time I went back to school. And so a non-traditional student, I was able to kind of forge my own way. I did a lot of reading by myself. I did, connecting with people around the country and even overseas about what was going on and how they were doing it. But I have a whole library of this kind of stuff. So I was really trying to learn and then to implement that learning and to, bring it to people on the inpatient unit or outpatient settings or whatever. So because of that and because of the results that I've seen, to your second point, I really do believe that this needs to be more looked at more in a way in clinical settings, especially here in the United States. We are doing it to a certain degree with adventure therapy, wilderness therapies, even animal-assisted or animal interventions too. You have care and therapeutic farms. It's great, but I think in especially urban settings, I wanted to focus on. Here in Pittsburgh, it's a large, urban area or a big, small town, whatever. You don't have that much access, where there's not much attention as far as I'm concerned. We need more attention. So this is why I went into, training individuals and other professionals. I had accredited trainings that I taught over 400 people in, and then going again to national conferences and talking to other people there. It's great. I think we just need more. And we're at that kind of threshold where more studies are being done, some greater studies, some long-term studies that are happening. So we're getting a lot more data coming back that, come and informing us that we need to integrate this a lot more into not only psychiatric care, but healthcare in general.
Nice. And so now currently, in your career right now, what are you currently working on? Like, what is your position?
So I'm a supervisor at, it's called a step down unit, where individuals that are in hospital, psychiatric hospitalization under a locked unit, they're coming to our program to kind of slowly reintegrate back into the community. This is the site where a pilot program actually happened for the nature-related programming, where we developed more of a clinical atmosphere for these individuals that are coming into our program, and really generating a whole education group sessions around this. Individual therapists were actually working on this as well. So when I was the nature-related programming coordinator for the entire organization, I would be mentoring other people at other sites. We have like 70 different sites throughout the county. Mentoring other therapists, really to integrate this into their own practices. So that was part of my job. So that's continuing to this day. There's more individuals that are starting to do this and keep continuing to do this. And I'm still in contact too with the other agencies that I used to work with, and as far as developing their programs a little bit more. So although I'm a supervisor, I'm a lot more to other people. So really trying to support them to continue to even use their own brains and their own understanding of this, to work with their individuals, because you're seeing a lot of therapists getting a better clinical response from the people that they're serving, because they're able to learn in the process. They're not the power disparity where I know everything and you don't know anything, so I'm just going to teach you. This is a joint learning process. And it's fascinating to see what therapists are saying they're listening so much more from their patients, their clients, whatever you want to call them. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm still doing that, and I'm doing things like this. And I actually spoke for the Sea Wilderness Project. What was that? A couple months ago. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, one question that just popped into my head. Now, in all of your research and everything that you've done, did you ever have to look back to, did you ever find any of your research findings based off of kind of just not prehistoric, but like older cultures that are connected within within nature more in depth, like from hundreds of years ago? Say if you had Native American tribes and things like that, did you ever have to dig into any of those aspects to find some of the information that you now have?
Not to find some of the information. I think it's just been passed on from generation to generation. The indigenous tribes out there, they're doing this every single day. They're living in the natural world, and even people right now are studying their health outcomes and why they're so either happy or why they're living so long, or different aspects of their physiology and how they're connected to the natural world. So it's just inherent within the process. I mean, you kind of delve into a little bit more into the indigenous tribes and even the Native Americans here, and you get more of a spiritual aspect from it too, because they are so connected with the natural world. And I think that just adds yet another layer to everybody that's working with this, that once you get into that depth, it's deep psychology, where you're understanding a little bit more about yourself, because you have this connection, and you wonder what's out there, and you wonder why you're here, and that spiritual aspect really kind of fulfills yourself as as a soul being.
Absolutely. No, and that's something that and the entire time you were talking, that question was kind of running through my head, because I was so curious, because I feel like that's something not a lot of people realize. And like you had said before, it's not something that's newly discovered. It's just been that was lost and now is found again. And I truly think that I do see the reasoning behind that too as well, because just from personal experience, and being connection with nature, over these last couple of years, I actually just started to hunt. And I learned how to hunt and everything. And the way I was taught through my friends, the people that had taught me, you're one with nature. It's not supposed to be, I want to do this, what I mean, because whatever, you're doing it for a specific reason, what I mean. It's the cycle of life. You are taking life to then give back, and then it's really just makes you feel, at least for me personally, it makes me feel like I'm part of something bigger.
Sure.
You know what I mean? In such a huge world, it almost like makes things make a little bit more sense. You know, not in the side of in more of the natural side, not in the real world side where we're out and every single day we have our phones and we're constantly on computers, especially with today's
Right.
learning that, like, as I've gone on in the last couple of years, being at Slippery Rock and being in more of a rural area than where I've grown up, I think it really has impacted me personally, more than anything, being in touch with nature and like just all those different aspects.
I'm really glad that you shared that, because there's not many people. I try to elicit that from individuals, like their connection and what they're actually feeling. It's great that you're that in tune and understand that you're honoring yourself by honoring the natural world, right? So I mean, when you're hunting, I'm sure that you have, you know, for lack of a better term, you probably have a ritual after you down an animal that's something you're paying homage to its life, because there is that natural process there. So you're honoring that individual or that being, and you're honoring yourself too. And I think that's fantastic. So thank you for being upfront and sharing that too.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure, definitely. So Benjamin, last question before we wrap up here. I just want to ask you, where do you want to see all of this research and everything that you're doing? Where do you want this to see 5, 10, 15 years from now in the future? Where would you like to see all of the research compiled as an impact to the rest of the world, not only just the United States, but all over? Where would you like to see ecopsychology at in 10, 15 years from now?
I truly want this to be integrated within our society, be it the local society versus the global society, that we're honoring our place in this world and honoring the environment that we are being supported by. There needs to be kind of a circular motion here where we're not trying to overpower the natural world, but we're in tune with it. So from any aspect, from the financial to spiritual to whatever aspect we're talking about, I really hope that with the data that's being collected and the studies that are coming out, and the more interest by other people to understand not only themselves but the natural world, that we are becoming a more informed society, global society, that we can save this world and ourselves.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All right, Benjamin. So I think we're just going to wrap up. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us tonight. For all those listening, I am going to post Benjamin's report, The Nature for Mental Health and Social Inclusion, in the description. Please go give that a read. And Benjamin, do you have any closing statements for our listeners?
I really don't, but I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm honored to be your first official guest, and I really appreciate this time. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, so much. And thank you. And to the listeners, tune in next time for the SCA podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Shirley. Thank you very much.